the economic crisis that we are facing today is very different from the ones that we have seen earlier. For the first time in recent memory, the economic crisis has been triggered by a non-economic factor, which is a pandemic. The problems that we face today are a consequence of the coronavirus and the efforts taken in order to combat the virus. The virus has really brought the economy to a stop, not only in India but elsewhere in the world also. We need to face the problem squarely. There are different issues that arise in handling the problem. First of all, there is the medical healthcare problem. We have to combat the virus and bring it down, and that is the most important thing. This does involve the cooperation. We have a large number of people, medical people, paramedical staff, the government, various types of organizations, in order to bring the crisis, the virus down. This does involve quite a bit of expenditure, extension of hospital facilities, purchase of ventilators, hiring of more medical and paramedical staff, and of course the various kinds of tests that have to be done and so on. So there is quite a bit of expenditure on this count. We will not go into it today. Then, in order to combat the crisis, we had to impose a lockdown. This has brought in its way a large number of problems. One of this has been the fact that the production system has come to a stop, and this has thrown out many people out of employment, more particularly the daily wage earners and the migrant labor. This is a problem that we have to face immediately. We have to provide for the people who have been thrown out of employment. It is a heart-rending sight to see the migrant labor walking back several hundreds of miles to go back home. I think it is important that we address this issue, provide them not only some cash relief, but also food and shelter as we do it at the time of drought or floods. I think the first thing that we do at the time of floods is to give food to the people who have been affected. That is what we should have done. We are doing it, but we should have done even more. Then comes the most important thing from an economic point of view, is the fact that the imposition of lockdown has resulted in the production system coming to a grinding halt, because workers then cannot go to factories, people cannot attend offices, and therefore the entire system has come to a stop because of the lockdown, which is a decision which has been taken by the government in order to combat the virus. Therefore, the question that we need to pose before ourselves now, from an economic point of view, is how do we move, or how do we go from here? Obviously, if the lockdown is not lifted, it is very difficult to put the economy back on the rails. Therefore, one important decision that the government will have to take is whether to extend the lockdown beyond April 14, or whether it should be curtailed, or whether it should be replaced by a phased reduction in the lockdown. There are many suggestions here, but I would say from the point of view of the functioning of the economy, the relaxation of the lockdown is absolutely essential in order to be able to get the economic system moving. Therefore, the cooperation of the government, the central bank of the country, and the financial system becomes necessary if we have to move the economic system back on rails. What can be done for it? I think that's the important question that we need to face. As the lockdown is lifted, the producers will want to go back to production. And at that particular point in time, it is the role of the financial system, more particularly banks, to provide the credit they need in order to be able to run the production system. They have to forget, the bankers have to forget a little bit about the past of the enterprises. They should start afresh and think of the needs of the enterprises and do it. There is the need for what I might call certain forbearance, regulatory forbearance. We cannot impose the earlier rules, and therefore the central bank of the country has already started moving in the direction. Perhaps we need to have a redefinition of what a non-performing asset is. Therefore, the question that we face now is immediately to get the production system started, and therefore the banks must be willing to provide credit to the producing enterprises immediately so that the system starts moving. Unless the system starts moving, we cannot find solutions to many of the other problems like employment or moving the essential goods to the appropriate places. Now the problem is not only faced by the production units, but also by the various services which link the producing units with the markets. The transport system becomes important. Road, rail, all of those have been closed, and the transport mechanism, the system has to reopen, and whatever is needed in order to enable these transport services to come back to work must also be undertaken. Therefore, the banking system needs to look at not only the production enterprises, but also the service industries, which also need to start working immediately so that the many essential commodities and many other products can be moved from the factories to the relevant places. Therefore, there is a lot of tasks to be done before us. And the only way in which this can happen is for the banks to take an entirely fresh look at the problem and really come forward to cooperate with the enterprises and service providers to give them the credit which is needed, to give them the liquidity which they require, so that the production system starts moving. In fact, once that starts moving, many of the other problems that we are talking about in recent times, about people who have been thrown out of employment, also will be solved. Therefore, even the migrant labor may start coming back, or the migrant labor which have stayed here would be willing to come back to work. Therefore, in the sequencing of expenditures, first we have the healthcare expenditures. Second, we have the expenditures to be incurred by the government to take care of the people who have been thrown out of employment. Third comes the necessity to bring the production system back to work. And there, the banking system, the financial system has an important role to play. I can also say that the production capacity exists now. It is not necessary to create capacity now. We have to operate the capacity and produce the goods. And therefore, working capital requirement may be even larger initially than the long-term capital. So the banking system will be well equipped to do this, and therefore provide the short-term credit which is required to start the system moving. So that is, what can the government do? I mean, the government has been preoccupied in the first stage with handling the virus. Their attention has been focused on getting the medical and paramedical staff and the hospital facilities tightened up so that the problem can be tackled. They have also announced certain relief measures for the people who have been thrown out of employment. Some people think that even more must be provided perhaps the government will have to think. But it is also a fact that since the production system is not functioning, the revenue of the government is also not coming. But unless the goods are produced, excise duty collection will be less. And unless the transport system moves, the collection through the petroleum duties will also be less. Therefore, once the production system starts, it will. But at the same time, the government also must look at specific sectors of the economy which have been particularly affected. For example, the hospitality sector, the transport sector, and others have been very severely affected. Therefore, some amount of relief can be given to the affected sectors. In terms of deferment of dues, they go to the government. That is the only way in which they can really help them. There are other things that physically that they can do, but more importantly, in order to get the economic system moving, the banking system, in collaboration with the central bank of the country, must provide the required credit of the enterprises to start production. The government must look at the problem and give wherever possible, particularly in the case of sectors which have been badly affected, to provide some stimulus through deferment of dues and so on, so that those service providers can also begin to work. As I said, all of this depends upon the fact that we might be able to lift the lockdown and move forward. But once that is done, the banking system, the government and the central bank must be ready to take the necessary steps to enable the system to start moving fast.